Welcome to Uncorked, a cult wines podcast where we take you behind the scenes of the fine wine market. This week, my usual co-host, Jonathan Stevenson, is unavailable. So I've had a step in at the last minute, but a very trustworthy and high quality step in, I must say so. Aarash Ghatineh, who you might have seen on the second pod that we did, is joining me as my co-host today. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to be here. I prefer to actually be invited for the second time rather than be the default option. But
Right.
I'm happy to be here again.
Oh, that set the tone, hasn't it? Interesting.
Yikes.
I thought the second episode, I thought I gave enough in terms of like quality anecdotes, a bit of my experience in terms of what was going on in the market to be invited back properly. But yeah, I suppose.
Well, hey,
being
at
a
least
default option is not the worst.
At least this time you have a different mic setup, so you don't feel so restricted, right?
And joining us on the couch this week is someone who has been an absolute key part of the podcast up until this point.
Yes.
She's very much been behind the camera, and we've convinced her this week to step in front of the camera and be our guest on the couch. It is Alexa Atkinson. How are you doing today?
Thank you. And I just want to put it out there. You promised a bottle, 6 cases of wine. Sorry, case of 6 wines. What was it for being on the couch this week?
I mean, none of the above.
Dang it. I just thought maybe I could throw it in there. But no, thank you for having me. Very excited.
Are you excited to be this side of the camera?
No, but I'm I'll take one for the team. That's what Cult Wines does. We're family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what podcast episode are we on today?
We are on episode 6.
Episode 6.
Well done, guys.
Yeah,
Flying by.
6 months of content.
Exactly.
6 regular listeners as well.
Hey, come on, we have a bit more than that.
Well, look, actually, because you touched on listeners, we'll go into what the plan is in terms of the content for today. So we thought, as we are kind of into our 6th episode now, we've got a few under the belt. And as Aarash said, we've got such a large following. We were actually going to review all of the listeners' questions that have come into us via email, through social channels. I mean, Alexa, you gathered these, so you'll probably tell me better where they've emerged from. But
yes, we do have quite a bit of commentary coming in, which is great. Thankful to everyone who's sent in some stuff. It's come from all over, which is great. We've also just had people naturally tell us how excited they are to stumble upon us, which is great. I think it's
and more
interesting.
importantly, they love to tell us when they think we're wrong. So we
They
get
definitely
to address some of these accusations.
Yes, we've definitely been told once or twice that maybe our suggestion of a decent price per bottle is maybe a bit too high.
Yeah.
So today, hopefully, we've redeemed ourselves a bit in terms of cost per bottle.
Well, look, I mean, we've got probably far too many questions that we'll actually be able to get through today. So we'll take it in turns, I think, just to pick one at a time and address as a group. But there's plenty to get stuck into and quite a few interesting different topics to go through. So yeah, that's kind of the plan for today. Just before we get started on the listeners' questions, though, I'd love to ask you a few questions, Alexa, and I'm sure Aarash will as well, about your own personal journey of wine, and maybe you can just tell everyone your background, how you joined the business, and what you do, and hear a little bit about your journey, shall we say?
Yes. Well, my wine journey is I would still say in its infancy. I'm only WSET Level 2, but plan to do my Level 3 going into the new year, which I'm very excited about. I've always had a passion for wine. I didn't know as much in terms of grape varietals, but I knew that I enjoyed it in terms of consumption, and not in a bad way. But just enjoyed wine and had a passion for kind of learning more about it. In terms of joining the business, I was actually brought on as the web designer, which quickly evolved into you guys realized that I was a jack of all trades, and could handle quite a bit more than just updating the website.
Just talking up your own book here.
I mean, I gotta get my resume up there somehow. Right? No, I mean, Cult Wines has quickly become my family. I'm obviously not English, so I'm from the States. And I mean, you guys took me under your wing and showed me the ropes of the wine world. And now I now live by the wine calendar, which is just
correct me if I'm wrong. You're from your home state's California, right?
Yes,
which
I
is
am.
obviously
wine, very much a wine
very
region,
much wine country. Did you have much exposure to wine? I don't know whereabouts in California you were, but did you have much exposure to the kind of wine culture in California at all when you were growing up? Or
yes and no. We did quite a lot of trips to Napa as a kid, but obviously I didn't get to partake. In the unfortunately the wine drinking age does not follow European standards in the States, so I think my wine journey started off a bit later than most. We're from more like San Francisco area when I grew up, and then we moved down to Southern California near LA. So I think I was like in the middle between wine regions. So not as much in terms of exposure, but I have been to Napa quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, from my time that I've spent there, it feels like food and wine is a big part of the culture. Out of most of the places in the US, whether it's you're down in LA or up into San Francisco or even, further north into Northern California, it feels like it's such a strong part of the kind of identity.
I think yes, to answer it briefly, but also I think it's emerging more from like the female dynamic of like being in the wine production world and the winemaking world. I think it's also trying to replicate that like French, the longevity of having like generations upon generations of people within the industry continuing on legacy wise, which I think is quite interesting. We're seeing California grow into, even though it's newer world, trying to produce like old world, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I think about it, there are a lot of estates in California, not exclusively, but predominantly in Napa, that do have like a very kind of heavy female.
Exactly.
So
I find that quite
winemaking expertise, especially winemakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that both on the production side and on like the actual just drinking culture side as well? Because a question comes up a lot. I feel maybe in the UK and in Europe it does feel like a little bit more male dominated.
Yes, I agree.
Whether it's the collectors, whether it's the people. We do tastings and events, and I'd feel pretty confident saying most events and tastings we're going to do in UK or Europe, it's going to be predominantly male in terms of the attendees, and obviously there's women there as well, but it always feels like it's probably going to be a 60-40, 70-30 split in terms of the attendees.
Yeah, I would reflect that commentary in terms of like the split.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in terms of, I guess, maybe the West Coast side of it, female, more drinking, maybe it is more I think maybe you're right in saying it's more popular for maybe women to be in the wine scene over there. I think maybe it's the men just like a bit more beer in the States, but I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Exactly the numbers.
And it feels like there's also a bit of a movement, especially in like California, for especially kind of like well-known females to kind of own wine brands that are maybe pushing more on like the natural side of things, the organic side of things, the healthier side of things. Maybe not necessarily solely just low or no alcohol, but certainly, I think is it Cameron Diaz has got that wine brand that kind of really focuses on the transparency of like the ingredients and what goes into it, and
more
kind
of
like
a holistic approach to it.
Yeah, and just maybe being a bit more kind of, I suppose, position it in a way that I think probably will resonate more with that younger female audience.
Yeah, I would say so.
The more like the traditional wine
side does. Younger people
does.
care about what goes into what they consume. Not saying older generations don't, but I think it's more of a popular opinion to know exactly what you're putting in your body, which is why we're seeing a trend in terms of younger drinkers, younger generations coming into that drinking scene and understanding and appreciating, different asset classes more, i.e. wine, art, and watches, which I think is also very interesting.
Yep.
What's the most memorable experience you had with wine so far?
I went to a 100-point wine tasting at 67 Pall Mall last year. Paul DeClerc, who was on the couch, had an extra ticket available, and I happened to be in the office that day.
Nice.
And it was by far, like, I genuinely didn't feel like I should be there. Like, I was like, this ticket should have went to someone who has more, wine knowledge than me, but I absolutely enjoyed every moment of it.
Do you remember what the lineup was of wines?
From that, everyone's like, oh, you're obviously gonna love the Rothschild. It was 2019's, I think, as well. They're like, Rothschild's gonna be your favorite.
Lafite Mouton.
Lafite, sorry.
Yeah, Lafite 19.
And I went out of there just loving Cost d'Astronel.
Which one? 09? Yeah, it must have been 09, right?
09, yeah.
I thought it was a mix between the 09s and the 2019s as well. So
I was just trying to figure 100-point COS would be 09.
Maybe
sure it wasn't a 10-year I think it was looking at like the Bordeaux vintages from 2009 to 2000.
Yeah, so there was like a spectrum of them, but there was like Senya was there? Please apologize for any.
But it's 100 points. So it's the vintage that got the 100 points, right? Yeah. The COS 09 was the one for you.
Yeah, that's my wine claim to fame, I would say. Is being able to sit in on a 100-point wine tasting, which
I think the price point of COS 09 is about 2,500 a case. Is that right?
Yeah,
around that sort of level.
3 now. Yeah.
Definitely the most expensive wine I've ever drank.
£200 a bottle in bonds, so plus GT VAT, we're looking at about 250.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right up my comfort zone.
What was that comment you made at the start about listeners' problems they have with this?
Like I said, I didn't ask for the ticket. I just happened to stumble upon it. So, but yeah, I would say that's my wine claim to fame.
Not a bad one.
Yeah, I'll take it.
But I'm sure I can top that.
Oh, get out of here.
What's your most memorable wine experience?
I would say, wow. Most memorable wine experience would be either Obrion 89.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
I mean, when I was on the pod for the first time, the Vega Sicilia 65 was incredible.
Oh yeah,
I had the Unico, and then probably any Loire wine I've had with a bit of age,
yeah,
as well.
They all qualify.
Yeah, so
yeah,
unbelievable experiences. But I still don't think you can go wrong with like an unbelievable bottle of Old Bordeaux that's been stored perfectly. Like if you think about like some of the experiences we had from like 1990s, even before that, had the pleasure of tasting some really older chem as well, which was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to be able to experience some older vintages. I think right now the oldest I've ever done was in 1986, but it was from like a friend's vineyard in Saint-Emilion. But we had a tasting with Ramirez last week, and I got to try one of their 1996 Gran Reservas.
Right. Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Like
Really?
absolutely incredible. Loved it. Like I think I haven't had the opportunity to appreciate enough older wine, and it just has such a different sweetness. I don't like, not sweetness in the sense of sweetness, but it has a sweet feeling to it. Like that nostalgic love of it. So go out, get yourself an older bottle. Just compare it to something young, because it is definitely experience.
Yeah.
Good advice.
But also I think.
What can I say?
But also I think if you are going to do that, like Rioja is a good place to go for that type of experience, because one, it isn't actually going to break the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking recently on like Cult X, for example, and we had stuff like 97 Rioja Alta at like, under £50 a bottle, and you're thinking that's unbelievable value for a wine of that age.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, with like the Gran Reservas, because they're aged for longer, they're released from the winery much later. Even though it's 97, it's actually probably only been in. Well, that one was probably taken from the actual winery, but other examples will have only been on the market for a much shorter period of time. So at least the quality and the provenance of the wine is going to be maybe higher than base. A 97 Bordeaux, for example, has been on the market pretty much since the year 2000, right? So that's 25 years worth of storage versus the older Riojas, have obviously been in the winery for longer. So it I think protects that whole experience a bit
when it's being
better.
held at the
yeah
I agree.
So there we go. Before we move on to listeners' questions, did you have anything else for Alexa before we moved on?
No.
All right. Bye, guys.
No, I think we're good. I think it was a good intro. Long enough.
I know. Can we stop talking about me, please?
Before we get into listeners' questions, I just wanted to touch on a little bit of the market news. We like to keep things topical. I think obviously the last time we were here, obviously Sean was on the couch, and one of the things we talked about was that feeling that things had started to improve in the market. We were starting to see some leading indicators. I think we talked about sort of what was kind of bouncing, or what was kind of starting to be bid up a little bit, and we touched on some of the areas of the market where prices had started to either recover or stabilize or even start to move a little bit. So, Aarash, I'll throw it over to you. I mean, since that pod till now, what further evidence have we seen around where the market is in terms of the current sort of conditions, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really interesting few months. But I think what's most pertinent for listeners or viewers is that the LiveX indices in September have shown the first signs of positive momentum.
Yeah.
Not all of the indices, because obviously there's many of them to track, but let's take a look at the LiveX Fine Wine 50, which tracks the last 10 physical vintages of Bordeaux First Growth. That's been up for the first time since March 2022.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Do you know the percentages of what it's up?
I think it's up 0.3% in September.
March 22 was the last time it went up.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I mean, those words haven't come out of my mouth since March 2022.
Wow.
That's right when I joined your company.
And then I think in terms like the headline or benchmark indices like LiveX Fine Wine 100 and LiveX Fine Wine 1000, the Fine Wine 100 was up 1.1% in September.
Okay.
Which is quite a big move.
Yeah. 1 month,
in the context of what's happened in the previous 8 months of 2025. So I've been saying this phrase a lot. Obviously, one swallow doesn't make a summer.
Yeah.
But it does feel like there is signs of a shift in sentiment within the fine wine market.
Yeah.
And, we know that products like wine do thrive off sentiment and confidence and momentum. So let's see what the next 3 months bring before the end of the year. For observers of the markets, clients of ours, listeners who are interested in trends when it comes to fine wine, the period kind of September through to probably end of January is amongst the most buoyant in the fine wine market. Okay. It's not just because of seasonality of like celebrations like Thanksgiving, Mid-Autumn Festival, which maybe we'll assess the results of that in the next pod in terms of trade data from Asia, or New Year's, Christmas, or Chinese New Year on the other side of the calendar. But we're definitely in, I think, a different environment for fine wine, where we can see a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel, which feels good to say. Because
it's been a while.
It's been a dark tunnel for the last couple of years.
Is there any like early commentary coming out from, I guess, like people within the trade, or anything about these like the rebound of the indices, or any like initial predictions that you can kind of think of without obviously giving any figures or numbers? But like, is there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I look at it in two ways. Okay, because the indices will give us a signal in terms of like how the market is, where the market is heading. But actually, as we've talked about on this pod, and as we talk about a lot at Cult Wines, beneath that is like, where are these transactions taking place? Okay, what's the value of these transactions? What's the volume of these transactions? And actually, what is trading up? So, in the last week, it was pleasing to see, okay, Chateau de Chem 2015 trading up. Okay, Tignanello trading up 2010, 2015. Dom Perignon vintages trading up. What else is trading up? So
Lafite 19.
Yeah, Lafite 19 trading up. So
some of the names that you would expect.
Actually, a couple of older vintages of first growths, like Hoperon 2000
and this is trading up. People say, what does that mean? It's not just looking at one trade. There has to be a minimum number of 5 trades taking place in that week. In order to qualify for that criteria, being able to to trade up. So I think what we're seeing is people are coming back into the market. When I say people, they're like, what do you mean people? I think if we think about the flows that can actually influence wine prices, okay, you have consumers. And I think it's very difficult to look at some of the prices, obviously not across the board, but for a lot of wines within our universe, and say they're not good value to drink. Okay. We don't have enough time, but I could rattle like 50 off the top of my head, but like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. You buy that for your selling, you drink it at home. It's drinking superbly now. And then if you think about it from, the like global distribution in terms of hotels, restaurants, who are big liquidity, can be big liquidity providers for fine wine. What a great time to stock up a cellar of a new restaurant. What a great time to stock up your cellar of a new private members club. What a good time to stock up a cellar of like a group of luxury hotels globally.
So that whole comment, like, buy the dip and be smart about it.
Well, I just think there's prices for assets don't go down in perpetuity. Like, it just doesn't happen. So why would it happen for wine? Okay. We've spoken about it a lot around people are drinking less. Okay, yeah, we're not going to go down that road today, but it's very difficult to ignore the value on offer, and that's across a broad spectrum of regions. Absolutely. Not just Bordeaux, which has come off, not just Burgundy, which has obviously come off, a lot, but looking at stuff from like, Châteauneuf-du-Pape 2017. Don't put it in a glass for me to blind taste, but it's some are like Domaine de Pagao. What else we got in Châteauneuf-du-Pape? We were even looking at the top end, look at price of Rias that have come down significantly. So, in answer to your question, I don't think it's a case of buy the dip. Okay. And you're very generic in that. I think you need, because there's so many good options available, you actually really need to be disciplined in what you're buying, because we don't know whether we're in for a V-shaped recovery. Actually, we don't really know what the extent of the recovery.
Talk to Sean about that.
Yeah, we don't know what the extent of the recovery is going to be, right? But you can hang your hat on certain labels, producers, vintages over the next 5 years, where if you look at it in terms of the probability or the simulation of where pricing is going to be, you'd have to be a very, very, very brave person to bet against prices increasing from where they are in certain areas.
Okay.
Agreed.
So what else happens with LiveX in terms of what gets released? For those who don't know, let's play the ad. Like, is it going to be stuff that's coming out over the next coming weeks, or like how do these indices get released? How do we, for those who don't know?
Well, you have indices that are
updated
on a monthly basis, and you have indices that are updated on a quarterly basis as well.
So these are the quarterly.
This is I don't want to go through every single LiveX index, but for the listeners, the main indices, let's look at, as I mentioned, LiveX Fine 150, LiveX 100, LiveX 1000.
Yeah.
And within LiveX 1000, you've got the sub-regions and the categories, which will have, your Bordeaux 500, you'll have your Italy 100, Burgundy 150, Champagne 50, Rhone, rest of the world.
Yeah.
Those are the indices that we're talking about.
Great.
There you go. Well, look, great to have a little bit of a recap on that. And as I said, I think because we kind of were touching on this area, it was just good to kind of circle back on that with the new information we have, and it's been really good to hear your insights and a bit more in depth around sort of where we think the market is right now genuinely, and sort of where it can go. So look, we said that 6 pods in, we've managed to source a decent amount of questions and input from listeners over the past few months, and we've collated them. So I think the best way to do this is we'll probably just take it in turns to pick a question, and see if we can answer it as a group, individually and collectively. Do one of you two want to kick us off and have a look through the list and see if there's something that tickles your fancy in terms of a question?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. Okay. I'm going to go with a question for Tom.
Right, here we go.
Oh, we're directing at people, are we?
Yeah, we're going to direct
okay,
them.
No pressure.
So, Tom, spotting the next big thing. How do you identify rising producers, regions early?
It's a good question. I think that because we were just talking about LiveX, I think it's interesting because obviously the wine market has a lot more data these days that people have access to, and I think that creates more efficiency. So it makes it easier for everyone to kind of see the same trends. But I think with that type of data, it almost kind of shows you the trend after it's occurred. And I think the real winners come where you can sense a change in direction, or a particular wine or a particular region or a particular producer that is gathering interest, because genuinely that is almost a precursor to any real evolution in, let's say, price, for example. So if you start looking at what is the precursors that can give you those indications, I'd say generally speaking, they're going to be 2 or 3 different ways. I think the first thing is, and this is probably the most obvious one, it's critics, right? It's critics, it's the reviewers, it's the publications, whether it's someone like a Neil Martin, whether it's someone like a William Kelly or Jancis Robinson, someone who's influential, Antonio Galoni. And I think, being really up to speed and up to date with the latest regions they're reviewing, the latest trends within those regions, latest producers that, might be, spotlighted that haven't been talked about before. I think the other interesting thing about this is certain regions are, what's the right way of describing this? I think certain regions are more open for a change in direction when it comes to trends or particular producers that become popular versus not. Somewhere like Bordeaux is very well established. It's such a well-established market. It's hard to really, spot the next big thing in Bordeaux because, well, these things have been around for 150 years. Not much has changed. There's not much opportunity to change. Even if there's a new winemaker at Lafite Rothschild or a new winemaker at one of the big classified estates, it doesn't really have an impact on, let's say, demand or price in the market, because the wines aren't marketed as being a representation of that winemaker. The winemaker's coming in to be a part of the wheel, and obviously a very important part, but to represent the brand and the DNA of the brand, right? So when you go to somewhere like Burgundy and other regions in the world where you have obviously generational change, whether it's the parents going on to the kids,
the handing of down,
and that can happen over multiple generations, whether you have impacts from like inheritance law, which forces families to sell off parcels of vineyards. And just 2 really good examples of this would be the generational side of things. Charles Lachaux coming in at Arnaud Lachaux was probably the best example of something you could spot as a change in philosophy of the wines. Pascal Lachaud, his father, was a winemaker for a long time after Robert Arnoux, who was Charles Lachaud's grandfather through his mother's side. But anyway, that family's estate kind of went from Robert Arnoux into the Pascal Lachaud, Arnaud Lachaud era, and now in the modern times under Charles. But that's three completely different styles. But actually, when he came in and as a younger winemaker, obviously there was a lot of hype around his influence from Domaine Loire, but in terms of his attention to detail on viticulture, on the way that he was practicing organic farming, the way that he wanted to change the philosophy of the vineyard in both how they handle oak in the wine cellar. I think they're the type of things that if you're really plugged in 2014 when that change happens and you can see the things that he's doing, that's the type of thing that gives you an indication, okay, this is something to look at, because their plots are incredible. Like, you can see they own Romilly Saint-Vivant as a Grand Cru, for example. They had some absolutely perfect plots in Vaux Romilly Premier Crus and Nuits Saint-Georges, and they've got a great profile of Côte de Nuits vineyards. So you start putting the pieces together and say you've got a change of winemaker, you've got a young generation who has a different philosophy, and you have some fantastic terroir to use. So those two or three things immediately, and I know this is something that we did, put us onto the Arnaud Lachaud scent from the 2014 vintage. And for us, once we had the opportunity to taste his first vintage and we could see stylistically where this was going, and don't get me wrong, he's got better and better and better, and you probably say maybe 18, 19 vintage was probably his nadir in terms of really getting his stamp and blueprint on the wines, and then from there they've really skyrocketed. But some of the best returns from an investment perspective have come from collecting Arnaud Lachaud, from the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 vintage, getting in early, buying at relatively cheap prices compared to how much you're paying now for the Grand Crus and Premier Crus. So that's a good example of kind of, understanding each particular region, understanding how these changes can occur, keeping an eye close to the ground in terms of some of these evolutions. And I think the other thing is social media, right, and community tracking. Absolutely. So I think they're the two biggest evolutions since social media's come along, right? Let's say that's in the last 10 years, really. Let's say probably since 2012. I think Instagram came about. I know Facebook was behind that, but I think Instagram as a platform has become massively influential in the wine market. There's some massively influential wine collectors on that platform who drink the greatest wines in the world, and it's just happened at the moment, right? There's a new white wine that I'm seeing crop up multiple times, and it's a white wine, it's a Chardonnay that's been produced in Burgundy that's coming up, and it's cropping up, and I'm seeing it on photos, and I'm now seeing it shared by certain people again and again, and already I'm looking at going, that I know that's going to become something that's really popular.
Can you put us out of our misery? Which one's that?
So do you know what it's called?
That Chardonnay that shall not be named.
No, do not.
So I'm gonna have to use my phone a little bit here because I can't remember it, because it also, the first thing is a very unfamiliar bottle shape, and it is the new winemaker that took over from Van Berg, who was a Matra winemaker, and all right, let's get it up. Vandenberg, the Vandenberg wines in Burgundy?
Yep.
So, what's it called? You speak amongst yourselves while I'm trying to get this up.
I was just curious, like when he was saying, like obviously the handover, the hand down of generation, like is that something you can taste, like in terms of like producers kind of passing the baton, if you
absolutely.
will? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's another great example in Burgundy would be the Domaine de Monti wines.
Yeah.
And the quality for the wines, nowadays, and this is obviously no disrespect to the current team there, but you can definitely tell the difference in terms of quality and style.
Yeah, definitely not from a quality perspective, but I think it'd be interesting to like you take like almost tasting the characteristic changes and what they've decided to do in terms of like, do they change? Are they changing how it's stored or processes or how, like, I don't know.
I think it's just the winemaking processes.
Yeah,
the winemaking processes have evolved tremendously. The use of technology is much
absolutely.
more well understood and applied compared to generations before. So yeah, sometimes for good and bad.
So I can put you out your misery now. An up and rising winemaker in Burgundy, Tino Cuban, has a fantastic background.
How do you spell that?
Tino.
Yeah.
Cuban, Kuban.
New one for me.
Yeah.
He had several experiences, and look where he had experience. Okay, Felton Road, Pierre Auverneuil, Jean-Yves Bizot, to name a few. finally settled in Meursault and he's taken over Bernard van Berg. Bernard van Berg was really famous for making natural wines in Burgundy, which are really popular, which is regarded as one of the most influential names. And his first vintage was in 2019. Yeah, and this is the name I can remember. So he renamed it Les Jardins Vivants. So yeah, there's a particular white that he makes that has a really interesting bottle shape as well. But anyway, it's just a good example of, you know, this one. Have you seen that one before? This is not going to be good for people.
We'll make sure to include an image in the
No, I haven't heard of the producer
so you can
either.
see this too.
Yeah. So
nice bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very unique style of bottle, very non-Burgundian. So you look at that and you don't even realise that's from Burgundy.
Yeah.
But I think the Chardonnay comes from Meursault. I actually don't even know if it follows the AOC appellation controlling, which I think is a question we have later on.
I was going to say, speaking of AOC systems and out of appellation moves, because we do have a question about that.
but that actually talks to a slightly different point beyond the Burgundy point, because that actually talks about the philosophical point of his philosophy. This new winemaker follows Van Berg's, which was also very naturally driven, which is a Jean-Yves Bizot approach. And we've seen that as a general trend across wine, full stop, right? Natural wines, organic wines, biodynamic wines. And how can you sense that? Well, you can kind of sense that from the wines you see on restaurant wine lists. You know, the dominated old world wines of just having Bordeaux and Burgundy is changing. And you're starting to see wines from Jura, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, Ganavat and Auvenois leading the way. But then you kind of think, well, who's the next underneath that? I think the other way to think about it is... I think in the wine market, collectors are always looking for the next thing. It's almost like a badge of honor. If you talk to like the big wine collectors, you want to be the guy that's discovered the next big thing. And I think that as a kind of almost like a cultural representation of the wine collector of today, it always means that there's room for these new up and coming producers to suddenly grow in popularity. And everyone wants to be, oh, here's the next... Well, Jean-Yves Bizot at one point was the next Loire, but now everyone says, who's the next Jean-Yves Bizot? And Prairie Rock was probably the one before that. So you kind of... And now this is the new Bizot. So you've kind of got a list of like 4 wineries that have come one after the other who are all the next version of that. And, you know, obviously we love our football. We always see that in football, right? No, who's going to be the next Messi and who's the next Ronaldo? And, you know, obviously you have the new generation coming underneath and you go, oh, Lamine Yamal, he's the new version of... you know, what Messi was before it or whatever it might be. But it's kind of, you see it in the wine world as well. But the final point on that is, you know, social media can be a really good influencing factor in terms of the labels you're seeing people pick up. I also think that, you know, just spotting the trends that you are on the market, the natural wines are becoming more popular, and understanding who are the kind of leading lights in different regions around the world for that. And community tasting notes. So if you look on things like Cellar Tracker, you know, and you look at what people are tasting, what people are saying about those wines, again, you can get a representation of that. Like, let's say that Tino Cuban wine, you can go on Cellar Tracker and look at the reviews and the tasting notes. And if you're seeing a guy from Hong Kong and a guy from, you know, New York and someone, you know, from Europe, you know, all having similar experiences and referencing them in a similar way or talking about them as the next X, Y, and Z, again, that starts to put you into a place where you think this is someone I should be taking notice of.
It travels well enough to at least be on your radar.
Yeah, and also from a gastronomic point of view, I do think a big signal as well as if you go into like the top restaurants around the world, like, and you look at the wine list of like a Michelin star restaurant, then it'll give you a pretty good read on what's like in vogue or on trend.
Yeah.
I wasn't in a Michelin star restaurant a couple of weeks ago. I was in Stockholm, and it's the first time there, and I was just so surprised by the wine list I saw there.
Yeah.
Really?
Like, it was one of the most advanced lists I've seen for champagne. Like, as someone who is really into champagne, to see some of the list of producers, you know, Grower Champagne, you know, some like, you know, the emerging Blanc de Noir, 100% Pinot Meunier.
Does this mean
I would say there is also a bit of a hint there if you are into your food and you're going to restaurants and you're seeing the similar kind of names that aren't the obvious ones.
So are you saying sommeliers are the tastemakers of our time?
Ooh, I like that.
I never thought those words would come out of my mouth.
But I kind of love it. And I think it's for
it's
our
one of the factors that I would also, you know, look at amongst some of the others that you mentioned before getting into like the actual signals that you get from looking at trades that take place for, you know, for certain wines and how you know, where their distribution is. So
it's interesting.
I think that's more of like a layer for like a listener to think, okay, well, hang on a minute, when I do go to these restaurants, I'm going to maybe study a little bit more around the wine list and see if there's some names that actually I'm not necessarily familiar with. And maybe that'll be the discovery to go, oh, I'm just going to punch that into Cult X, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
Or wherever.
Nice point.
Yeah.
All right, should we? I mean,
Right,
we
let's
got
move
plenty
on.
of
Let's move
questions.
on.
Should
Let's
we,
move on.
You know, AG, you.
Who's going next? Come on, Alexa,
I mean,
you choose one.
To be fair, yeah, it doesn't have to be directed towards anyone, right?
No.
Okay.
Hang on. No,
okay.
you've had your go.
First gross versus top second gross, like where the smart buys are today and why.
I think there's a lot of value in Bordeaux at the moment. And I think with the market, to go back to the point we were making at the beginning, with the market showing some signs of recovery, where do we think the action's going to be in terms of like price, recovery? And it's hard to look past the first growths. I think
First gross are smarter than top second gross, or
I don't know. I mean, I was looking at an offer the other day, and it was like 2012, 2014 vintages, right? And like Leoval Parfait, Leoval Lascasse, decent names, Lynch Barge, and like the prices for the like 12 and 14 vintage is very, very attractive, like £600 a 12 pack or £700 a 12 pack. So certainly way below £100 a bottle, even with duty VAT on your table, way below £100 a bottle.
Coming from Bordeaux,
are we
that's good
talking?
value.
Are we looking at this?
Look
through
at Monroe's.
Are we looking at this through the lens of I'm buying to resell, at a profit in a certain amount of time, or I'm just looking to?
Well, I don't know, because that's what's your interpretation of?
Well, let's answer both sides. Okay, let's answer both sides. From my perspective, at least, I think from a rational investment point of view, looking at the last 10, 15 vintages of Bordeaux first growth is a great place to start
For investment.
For investment.
Okay.
These are the labels that trade the most, that probably trade every week, and have come off significantly in prices, as we've discussed, before.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see them trade up.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not one example of the first growths. If you take Lafite, Mouton, Hope Briand, Margot, I'll exclude Latour for the time being. You look at the vintages from 2015 to 2019, and you look at the last print versus the previous print, the lowest print of the last 3 months. They're all trading at the same level or above.
Last print, I mean, the last trade. Price that traded at.
Yeah. So, but then from a consumption point of view, like one of my wines of the year this year has been Monroe's 2014.
Yeah.
And that's available at like
cheap.
Yeah. For like 60, 70 quid per bottle on the table.
Yeah. And there's multiple vintages of Monroe's like that.
Yeah. So,
okay. Well, let's flip the script then, right? So what are some of the new and trending wines that people are like either collecting or investing in right now? Have you guys noticed any on that side from a trendy perspective?
I think New World wines feel more popular.
What about rest of world?
That's what I mean, rest of the world.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, rest of the world, for me, I categorize as being like South America.
Okay.
Australia, New Zealand.
So,
but you definitely see a lot of people buying wines from the New World and let's say the rest of the world category for collection investment purposes than you did before, I think.
Okay, so what about somebody who, this is kind of a combination of a couple questions that we have on here. What about, let's take it back to, I'm a brand new investor. I've never, I'm just a wine enthusiast. I like drinking wine.
Yeah.
How do I take that from being somebody who enjoys wine to somebody who would want to start investing in wine? Do you guys have any top tips, or how would you help educate me from going from one side of the coin to the other?
Wow.
Keeping in mind, let's say I have 5,000 budget, to get into it, to just see, dip my toes in the sand, 5 to 10K.
I think it's quite, if you think about the conventional investment thesis for looking at wine as an asset class, the thesis is, in order to generate the best risk-adjusted returns, you need to be well diversified, across regions, across vintages, across unit values, and across kind of resale strategies, maybe medium term and then long term, then long term. So I think with if you're just starting with £5,000, it's very difficult to get that diversification. Okay, so what are you really seeking? Okay, you're seeking labels that have I think a track record. Okay, labels that have a strong secondary market. Okay, so then you're naturally probably narrowing yourself down to stuff like Bordeaux, Italy, not solely like the super Tuscan wines, but even like Brunello's trade, frequently, or some of the, Barolos from like Gaia or Productori de Barbaresco, for instance, trades regular as we know, and the entry point for those types of wine aren't necessarily so high. And then looking at some of the producers in Champagne, maybe focusing on like iconic vintages of Champagne, like a 96 or an 02 or an 08, is a pretty good place to start. And then outside that, as you mentioned, New World wines. I mean, like you can get exposure to some like the most traded wines in the secondary market that, are probably like £50 to £100 per bottle from the New World.
So basically, what
Almaviva, Senya, Cheval des Annes, for instance.
Yeah.
So what you're suggesting is don't put all your eggs into one basket. Make sure that you have wines within your budget, but from different regions around the wine world.
I don't just want to have like a standard response, because it's really depending on the individual. Like the question is like, do you want to have 5k in 2 cases of Lafite 19 with give or take a bit of change, or do you want to have 5k spread across, I don't know, 5 to 7 different wines? And that's probably more of a personal choice rather than, I suppose, an investment choice.
Okay, so what would be your top tip for a new investor?
I think if you're, because you said you were grounded in like enjoying and drinking wine anyway.
Yeah.
So I think at that sort of level, which is obviously right at the beginning of their journey, with a relatively small budget in the grand schemes of trying to achieve some of the diversification.
Yeah.
I think you are still quite well placed, at least choosing stuff that you have an affinity with or represents the types of wines you like to drink. Because I think at that sort of level, if you know you like a Bordeaux blend, for example, you can't go wrong picking up 5 or 6 cases of like the type of stuff we just talked about that are really good value right now that can be drunk, represent good value in the grand scheme of like a second growth Bordeaux from vintages that you're getting at really good value. And then to the point around like New World wines, and then maybe expanding to say, well, what about Bordeaux blends from the New World that I also, would be in line with the types of wines that I like, that are also going to provide different value, maybe a slightly different, more variation to my collection. That could be stuff, that we mentioned. So, Catena Zapata from Argentina, or it could be, wines from Chile, like, mine's gone blank.
Don Melchor or
Senya Almaviva, those types of wines. So, that'd be sort of where you'd want to get started to create a bit of fun and enjoyment around it, I think.
I mean, I can keep rattling off some questions for you guys. Is there any? I know there was a couple on here that you specifically wanted to touch on, Tom. Sorry, I'm going from producer hat to now on the couch hat, and it's very strange for me.
Let's have a look at some of these questions. Right, so accessibility versus aspirations. So the question was, listeners say many can trade up from mass market brands for plus £4 to £8. How do we guide that upgrade path?
I think maybe it's.
I think the point here was that people are willing to pay kind of like £15 to £20 for wine at home. I suppose it could be something like a chocolate block, right? In Waitrose, it's kind of in that sort of price point.
Yeah.
And the viewpoint was you could easily trade up an extra £5 to £10, which doesn't feel like a massive stretch, and suddenly you're getting into 25, 30.
A completely different realm.
And actually, we're opening up some of the stuff that we were just talking about. And I think on the last pod, I gave an example of Il Poggione 2016, which is kind of like £25 mark, like £150 for a case of 6. Which is effectively just a small trade up from someone who's already willing to pay 15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there was a disconnect between the two, where people feel more confident and secure at that £15 to £20 mark and aren't willing or confident enough to go up to the £25 mark, which is only a small increase. So the question is, how do you create that pathway for people to have confidence in trading up and spending slightly more, but getting, let's assume, would be a much more transformational experience with a higher quality wine?
I think in terms of coming from someone who is probably still stuck in that 15 to 20 a bottle, if I'm just having trying to grab something for the weekend, maybe from my perspective, I've tried to try different varietals that are similar to the ones that I would be willing to spend a bit more on, so I can get a taste for what it would be like. But that's coming from somebody who, once again, in their probably infancy of wine journey, if you will. But I think that's how I kind of start to justify spending a bit more for different not vintages, sorry, for different grape varietals, and just trying new stuff. Like I'll spend 10, 15 more if I know that it's something that I've had before at an experience or an event that I know, ooh, it really kind of takes you to that moment. So maybe it's more connected to the, kind of experience side of enjoying wine. Again, for me, from an investment perspective, I do like to find something that I know has been recommended by others before, is trading, but also if you find it at a great price, get a pack of, a case of 6, let it sit there. In, a couple weeks time, someone's going to snatch it up.
Yeah, I know it's easier said than done, but actually being able to travel to some of these wine regions,
oh, absolutely,
and go there and taste on site and get a really much better perspective on, the not only the history but the winemaking philosophy, the style of the wines. That's going to educate a lot of people.
Yeah,
and I mean, look, it's not out of the realms of possibility to go to Champagne.
Yeah,
hop on the Eurostar, get the TGV from Paris, and you're in Champagne within a couple of hours. As you mentioned, it's not too difficult. And other areas of Europe where there's great wine produced, Portugal, Spain.
Yeah.
Not just looking at France. So, but if you can't do that, like the role of the local merchant is huge.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I live in the southwest London area, and I think almost in every neighborhood there's a good wine shop.
Yeah.
And
they're very good.
They're pretty good.
Skip the major grocers. Go find your local. Give it a go.
Pretty good. This isn't a plug for them, but like you can go there.
So,
you can go there and you can taste the wines, but before you, not all of them, but they've got a selection of wines you can taste.
Yeah, they've got a good selection.
On site, and it's quite a relaxing environment. So I think the role of the local retailer or shop has a significant role to play.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And also, what I say to friends who are looking to get into wine, or clients that are just starting their wine journey, is going there puts paint on that picture.
Yeah.
And that's that. Once you're there, you understand what goes into it, and you understand what you like and what you don't like. You have a better perspective. Then naturally, like, you're going to trade up because.
Oh, absolutely! I've never gone to a vineyard and left without buying a bottle of wine. From them, because you have that personal connection to it. It really does make a massive difference when you go and actually when you're in that moment.
I think we're all basically saying the same thing, which is effectively like the
go drink wine at the vineyard.
No, but like, effectively experience is what's going to get people to do that trade up and give that confidence. But I think probably the thing that's a paralyzing aspect is people not wanting to make an expensive mistake.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying going from 15 to 25 is suddenly going to bankrupt someone, but still there's probably going to be a little bit of fear of, I don't want to go spend a load of money on a wine that then I don't like or enjoy and feels like a bit of a waste. But one of the other things I was just thinking in my head when you guys were talking was just that sort of aspect of like, if you have other people that have an interest in wine, let's say between 3 people, you all go, what if we were all willing to spend £20 on a single wine each, we put that together to get 1 bottle of wine just for the experience. Okay, it's not a whole bottle of wine to have on my own, but if there's 3 of us willing to explore further, then clubbing together to say, well, maybe on a weekly basis, let's get together and put our money together to get something that's 2 or 3 times what we'd normally spend, but it gives us the opportunity to have that experience, and then you kind of compound that over time.
Well, and like AG said, if you go to the little, the little local wine shop, they're more than happy to help guide you with. You can tell them like what your preferences are, tastes you like, flavors you like. They can, like you said, put our money together, go in, £60 bottle of wine. I'm sure we can find something that is new to us for an experience perspective, as well as something that's gonna, we're gonna enjoy from a taste perspective. So.
Yeah.
There we go. Nailed it.
Okay. I think I'm happy to go with the next question, which is talking about storage and proof.
Oh,
okay. So not necessarily the most glamorous of questions, but I think a very important one when it comes to the world of wine investment and collection. So what minimum standard of storage or provenance should a new collector insist on?
Okay.
Well, it depends. I mean, are we talking more in bond storage, or are we talking at home? Like,
Well, I think
right?
let's start with the
There's two
world, I
different
suppose, that's
ingredients.
most common to us is the in bond
The in bond
storage.
side. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what are kind of like the checks and balances that you'd need to go through as an existing collector or investor or someone that's just looking to get started.
I mean, obviously the packaging is important. Is it original wooden case? Is it possible to get a photo of the case to make sure that it's being looked after in the right way? I think there's certainly something to say the age of the wine has a big part to play in terms of what are the potential risks, and certainly as the price increases, the rarity and the age, obviously you want to do probably more checks in terms of original purchase invoice, what's the history and the provenance of the wine, where's it been, understanding how long it's been stored at that particular warehouse, if you can get that information. So
feels like quite a lot of hurdles to jump through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean,
it's hurdles that help protect your investment, though.
Yeah.
So ways, is the insurance on it worth it? I'd say so. For an in bond, I think in cellar you have to really make sure that everything is, if it's at your in-home cellar, you have to make sure everything is in pristine conditions in order for it to be okay.
Yeah, look, I mean, if it's home cellar wines, like duty paid wines, obviously you want to be doing a lot more physical inspection of the bottles in terms of like where the levels are, how high they are, how's it being stored? They're being stored upright, so have you got a dry cork, or is it being stored horizontal?
Yep.
Where obviously the cork will be moist. Obviously the light, which is hard to judge post. It's hard to judge how much it has been infected by light, for example.
I mean, yeah, but if you keep it in the original casing and stuff like that, you're protecting your assets a bit more.
Yeah, and obviously there's a few tips and tricks for like the rarer wines in terms of some of the things we were looking at in terms of certain processes they employ in terms of how the label's designed, where you might have Le Pan as being the example with the name being written inside the label. Yeah. You can see under a microscope. So there's little things like that, or under a black light, you might be able to see a certain aspect that's been applied to the label, so it's authentic. So there's little things like that you can do to further
authenticate,
especially kind of rarer, older wines that are in circulation.
Have they been doing that same kind of authenticity checks in the background, i.e. black lighting, etc.? I know NFTs are a bit newer, but have they been doing that for a long time for somebody who hasn't really been in the industry? In terms of like earmarking
like the last
authenticity.
decade.
Proof tags.
Yeah, proof tags. It's been a really crucial part of, I think, legitimizing wine trading, wine collection, and they've made significant advancements in that in the last 10, 15 years. I think compared to when I started, and if you'd go to one of the warehouses, a great operation at the time, but they just didn't have the technology or the know-how or expertise to be able to spot this.
Yeah.
But if you go there now, I mean, recently we were in Coast Vaults, and the level of like detail and forensic nature of like what they do there is is incredible. I mean, that Le Pan one was a good example, but it's also having the knowledge and also being open enough to know what your spots you're looking out for, and then having the technology to be able to do it, and also the consistency in terms of the process to be able to regularly
execute it on a mass scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
I think that's a massive plus for people that are in the market or entering the market, is the ability to identify fakes or wines with poor provenance. I think it's a lot more straightforward than it was 10, 15 years ago.
It's insane. Yeah. I mean, technology, even from, obviously within the storage facilities, but even down to where the vineyards are at and what they're taking, the entire industry as a whole in technologies enhancements have come a long way.
I think the one advice I would give is, we have seen a proliferation of wine merchants and brokers who are offering stock that they don't physically have.
Is that more the ex-seller stock? No, sorry.
No, the opposite. This is stock. So because of the advancement of technology and platforms like LiveX, you have a lot of wine merchants or wine e-commerce platforms that are integrating stock that doesn't belong to them in their shops that you can buy.
So they're broking.
They're broking. Yeah. But instead of the old school broking, it's very much kind of like technology driven. And you can normally spot this by, delivery time. So if, you go onto an e-commerce website, you speak to the wine merchant and they say, well, it's going to be like 8 to 12 weeks for the wines in Europe. Generally speaking, you're going to know it's coming from a source that's not them. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, and it enables a much wider selection of stock to be available to people in the UK, which is good. But I'd say on a flip point in terms of this question, in terms of what sort of storage and provenance should a new collector insist on, I think in those instances, they're the ones that you want to make sure that there is enough consumer recourse to those particular items, which the merchant hasn't possibly had the chance to check because they're physically not with them, right? So I think in those instances, you want to make sure that you either have some level of recourse or there's some extra layer of protection that this wine is in the best condition, authentic. Now, I'd guess that most it goes without saying that most high quality, reputable merchants who are dealing with physical stock that they have in the inventory, either their own stock or on behalf of custom reserves, I would have a high degree of trust around that. So again, for this question or for a new collector, I think, if you're working with the big names, the big wine merchants, the well-known companies that are dealing with stock that they have in their own warehouse or customer reserves that they're offering, not only do you know that those questions can be answered really quick and easily by them, so it's an easy question to ask, but two, I think you have a pretty high degree of trust around that because it's so important to most wine companies and wine merchants' business that customer reserves are looked after in the best way possible, coming from the best source. Like, just give an example of a few things we do. We have, when we receive stock at a certain price level, we photograph everything. When it comes in, we photograph the cases, we photograph the bottles. So at a certain price point and above, everything that comes into us above that price point, doesn't matter how old it is, what the producer is, where it's come from, whether it's been direct or not, we just deploy that because obviously that's at a level that, the effort involved in doing it is going to be worthwhile. Now, obviously, some of the wines we were talking about earlier, like, an Il Porgione at £150 per case, it's not feasible or conceivable to check every single case that comes in for a wine like that. But that being said, when the pallet comes in, it's palletized, and physically inspecting the wines as they land, we physically take a photo. That's for insurance purposes when they come into our warehouse, right? Because, if there is an issue, and we've had it before, 3 or 4 years ago, we took a delivery of some US wines from Scarecrow, 2016 100-point wine, and when it landed into our facility on the pallet, we physically inspected the cases, opened the first box, and you could see there was raised corks. So that then made us check every single case on the pallet. I think there was like 25 cases, and it turned out like 60% of the cases had issues with raised corks, which is resulting from exposure to high heat. We then managed to claim that back on insurance, and it ended up being something that was covered on the insurance policy as something that occurred during the transport. Now, if we hadn't have inspected it at the point that it landed and taken the photos, we wouldn't have been able to make the insurance claim. So it's little things like this which make you realize, like, it is so important for us, other wine merchants, other wine companies, with their own stock that they're buying for their inventory, for stock that they manage on for customer reserves behind, from an insurance perspective, to protect themselves. Like, we have to do these checks when the wines land. So when it comes to this sort of question, I think there is quite a lot of protection already baked in to that whole process, because if you're not doing that anyway, you're opening yourself up to quite a lot of potential danger in terms of the quality and the provenance of the wines. It's just only going to be an issue for you down the line. And then the second aspect of that is, that's where my advice would be probably to be even more insistent if it is something that you're seeing being broached rather than being physically in stock, because everything I just mentioned there could be an issue when it lands, and it also could be an issue that they don't know about that could exist with the stock before it even gets to them. So you always want to make sure that is probably just a thing that you insist on, or making sure at least that it's checked upon arrival into your own warehouse, or if you're storing it with that merchant, you get a photo, or when it comes into them from their supplier, that you have all of that information confirmed that the stock is as it appears, the bottles are good, the fill levels are good, the case is untouched, et cetera, et cetera. So they're the type of things that you can deploy to kind of mitigate the risks for you. But I think to your point earlier on about kind of bond and duty paid, or bond and out of home stuff, clearly wines that are in the bonded warehouse system are less risky than wines that are outside of the bonded system, because of the fact that, they haven't had duty or tax being paid on them. They've been tracked pretty much through their whole lifetime for government tax purposes. And generally speaking, I don't know any bonded warehouse in the UK from a wine perspective that isn't temperature controlled, humidity controlled,
up to a highest level of zero.
Okay, of course, some places might be better than others, and some places might deploy better tactics than others, and some might be able to provide a better, tracking of all of that information than the other one. But generally speaking, it's in everyone's interest who run those operations to have perfect controlled temperature and humidity and all this type of stuff. So as I said, it's not absolutely foolproof, but I think it's kind of baked in a little bit to the whole bonded warehousing system. Okay. And I think actually that's why we see so much wine globally traded through the UK, because the UK has the largest and widest bonded warehousing system anywhere in the world for fine wine, because the bonded warehouses don't really exist. Now, you do get some now in Europe, but before that, it wasn't actually possible because of tax laws.
Yeah. They're more like lockers for wine rather than like the actual... If you think that was
legally, until a couple of years ago, as a private individual, you couldn't withhold wines in France, for example, without tax. So, a French wine that's had tax being applied, you have like the tax stamp that's on top of the bottle. So there's little things like that which obviously can tell you if it's already been tax paid in somewhere like France. But because of that, you legally as an individual couldn't hold a wine suspended of tax, in France. But that's changed, I think, the last couple of years. So we might see an evolution of that type of warehousing. But I think for now, collectors who are in Asia, collectors who are all dotted all around the world, even in North America, there is a lot of people that actually choose to do all their storage and collecting and trading out of the UK just for that reason, that the infrastructure and the history is there. It gives you a certain degree of security.
The wine hub of the world.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm not sure how many other ones we can get down to. But I think it might be an interesting one to kind of close with. So like if you had, let's say, so we're trying to reduce the price per bottle point from one of our users' perspective. It's a bit too high. So let's say you had anywhere between like 100 and 150 a month to like go ahead and start a cellar, right? What would you guys recommend people should buy over the next like 6 to 12 months? And then at that point, we're probably almost nearing the end of this pod.
Okay, as we're approaching like a celebratory part of the year, then I think we've got to start with champagne. Okay, for sure.
Yes. Love a good champagne.
And there's so many good champagnes. But we're at 100 to 150 pounds per case, did you say? Or per bottle?
That's just a budget per month.
Per month.
Budget per month, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like you can get some.
Not just me drinking champagne for the whole month.
Maybe.
I think champagne, which champagne producers? I like Frederic Savard. Louverture is a great buy for if you're into kind of your grower champagnes.
Yeah.
And I think price point is probably around like 40 to 50 pounds per bot.
Yeah.
Outside of that, outside of champagne, I think
Italy's doing pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, there's just so many great Brunellos.
Yeah. They look good value,
it's difficult to look past, like as you mentioned, Poggio del Sotto, Il Poggione. They're two of my household favorites. Maybe spending a little bit more money, but Le Ranier, as well.
Yeah,
is delicious. I've heard there's some really good Swedish wines as well.
Yeah.
Now. I haven't tried them. I haven't tried them yet.
What about any recommendations for any like sweet wines over the holidays? You guys have any dessert wines?
There's incredible value in sweet wines.
I feel like sweet wines, they're on a...
you can go in now and buy like
they're a sweet
vintages
deal.
of like Riesec and Cute, of decent age that are...
Clémence.
I had Riesec in my...
25, 30 pounds a bottle, that sort of level.
In my Coltex portfolio, I went to go like do some testing on QA, or I thought it was on QA. I was on live, put it up for sale, and it sold within like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So definitely some sweet wines out there for this season as well. I think might be good shout.
Yeah. Again, Rhone is extremely well priced. Some like the Chateauneufs. Also think some of those
South America as well.
Incredible wines from like Loire Valley, some great Chenin, some great Cab Franc from Loire Valley as well.
But I'm just looking at some examples here, right? So Giacomo Conterno Barbera d'Alba Francia 2017 93 point wine, 38 quid a bottle. Great value. That's
incredible.
So 6 bottles, maybe slightly over 150, but not a million miles away. That's 93 points. Conterno is probably the most well-known.
Yeah, but if you're just building something up and you
it's incredible value. As you said, Rioja Calm's the Rioja, the second wine you can pick up last trade, £54 for a 6-pack. It's less than £10 a bottle for the second wine.
I paid 40 for mine, just for reference, and made, 15 quid on my sale that I wasn't supposed to do.
So, yeah, there's definitely accessible bargains, and some stuff. I mean, Santem, which is a Dennis Durantou wines. I mean, they're really good value. Again, Bruno Giacosa, you can get some of his entry-level wines. Ciro Pacenti from Montalcino, £70 for a case of 6.
Le Volte from Ornellaia.
Yeah.
That's delicious.
Le Cruzel from Lalonde de Pomerol, £80 for a case of 6.
I almost bought that.
I also think that to go back to
La Rioja Alta, so many good values. Rioja Alta, Torre de Honor Modelo Reserva, Rioja 2015. So again, 84 quid for a 6-pack. 84 quid for a 6-pack.
Well, it might be interesting. Maybe what we can do is we can put together kind of like a builder portfolio.
Marquis de Lem, third growth from Bordeaux, 2020 from Margaux, 93 points, 88 quid for a 6-pack.
Yeah.
We can do like a downloadable.
I mean, even getting a bit of this is interesting actually, because we're tasting 2019 Burgundy in today.
Yeah.
But entry level Bourgogne, and I know Bourgogne is obviously regarded as the lowest classification, but I actually think it kind of having a good quality Bourgogne Blanc or Bourgogne Red represents, all winemakers want to make a really good Bourgogne red or white, because I think it represents real skill from the winemaker. Because look, to a certain extent, everyone can make a great Richebourg if you've got the plot, and everyone can make a good Grand Cru Burgundy if you've got a good plot of land. But it takes a lot of skill to make a good Bourgogne. So I actually think this is the main Quacard Lasson Fleuret or CLF. £90 for a case of 6, 2020 vintage, obviously high quality vintage for the Bourgogne. Lafon Rocher, 90 quid for a case of 6. Again, another high quality wine owned by the Tesseron family that own Ponte Canet. We haven't even spent £100 yet, and there's lots of good options.
There you go. There's value in wine.
Pagode de Cos. You said Cos d'Estanel, right?
Love
09.
Cos.
So Cos d'Estanel's second wine is Pagode de Cos. 2017 scored 92 points. Last transaction, £100 for 6.
All right, I know what I'm buying myself for Christmas.
Oh, we've got an American one. I just finished on that. Resonance from who owns Resonance? Louis Jadot. Pinot Noir from California. Oh no, sorry, from Oregon. £108 for a 6-pack.
Nice.
And last one, it's a white wine from Ornellaia. So Ornellaia's white wine, Poggio alle Ghez. I can't pronounce Italian wine.
Your Spanish was really good before when you were talking about
Spanish is good. Poggio alle Gazzi dell'Ornellaia.
Can I get an outtake of that?
Toscana 2020, £110 for a case of 6.
Nice.
Good value. That's a very good wine as well.
Well, like I said, maybe what we can do is we can put together when we send out the descriptions of everything, maybe we can put together like a sampler builder for people, and they can take a look at some of these wines.
Yeah.
And we can kind of pull them out, because obviously, we're just rattling off a bunch to you guys. It might be useful to.
But I think it was interesting going through that, because it does represent the kind of regions we're talking about. So places
Absolutely.
like Piedmont, looking at Barbera, for example, with some good value there. Brunello de Montalcino, Tuscany, there's good value in there. Obviously, Bordeaux at the bottom end of the spectrum. Second wines are some of the good wines are really good value. Spanish wines, which we already said, again, was fitting into that criteria. Not a huge amount of Spanish American wines, but obviously 1 or 2 examples in there from Oregon.
We covered it globally, didn't we?
We had a couple of sweet wines in there as well, and a couple of whites. So, it just goes to show, under £150, there's a lot of stuff there that's over a 90-point score that's actually of a decent age as well, that's going to be delivering good quality wine. And so, again, I think the point is, especially addressing some of these listeners' questions, you actually don't have to spend, thousands of pounds to start buying and collecting good quality wines that are going to age. All of these wines here, they've got a bit of age on, but they would last happily for the next couple of years, easily, if not longer, for both drinking pleasure and for, resale perspective. So, yeah, that's the takeaway, I suppose, just going through that list, and what's our takeaway from it. I think that's what the learning is, shall we say. We were talking about, Bourgogne, and this is, again, an entry-level wine under £20 a bottle from Domaine Tours. Marchand Tours is a combination of Pascal Marchand, the winemaker from Burgundy, and Tours is a Canadian investor and collector, and they combine to create this label, this domain. I have to say, it does get a bit slightly confusing sometimes, because there's a few different versions of the same brand, but effectively those two came together to create this winery and this domain. And I think the style of the wines is in Burgundy that they make very transparent wines, very kind of reflective of the place and the terroir. It's not too heavy-handed. And I think stylistically, you know, they're not kind of heavy, overly extracted types of wines. They are kind of, as I said, transparent and kind of aromatic and light, and they have a good amount of sort of freshness and balance and poise. And I think, you know, probably the leading wine in their whole stable, and actually, I might go on a limb here. I think it might be the rarest wine in Burgundy. Musigny, yeah. I think they make a Musigny which is sub 200 bottles a year, which I'm thinking there might be one or two Dauphiné wines that are around that sort of level as well. But yeah, I think, you know, it's massively sought after. It's a few thousand pounds a bottle. So this is kind of the entry level, the opposite end of the spectrum. And 2019, we've talked about 2019 before, regarded as one of the best vintages of Burgundy in recent years. I think it has the potential to kind of rival some of the best vintages over the years, like 99, 2005, 2010, going back to sort of 1990, 85, 78.
But unlike some of those vintages, it's drinking well.
No, it drinks well, yeah.
Like, as we said, like on previous pods, like the 19 is just so approachable.
Yeah, unlike the 05s, which which still have to leave and kind of come around to. But, you know, there's certainly a vintage that's giving pleasure now, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful wine.
It's really good. And I think you touched on a really good point in terms of like the entry level. That's almost like the table stakes for a producer in Burgundy. Like if you produce a good Bourgogne, then actually that creates the intrigue to then explore all the other wines within the range. And
if you're Costerie, you get to charge like 250 quid for your Bourgogne Blanc.
There are benefits.
What did you think of that, Alexa? You like it?
Yeah, I mean it's gorgeous. I think it feels like it like breezes. I don't know how like you said, they're very light. It's like very light touch. It's beautifully balanced. I mean, it's young. I don't know. I feel like it could age quite nicely. But also,
I mean, this is 2019. It's a Bourgogne, so like
it's relatively inexpensive. It's inoffensive. It's really easy. I think it's a fantastic entry Bourgogne.
I did hear a rumor. I did hear a rumor somewhere that the main tours is Musigny.
Yeah.
In a blind tasting with other notable producer from Musigny, who shall not be named, like your Chardonnay. Came out on top.
Yeah. Interesting.
Nice.
So well worth the £2,500 a bottle.
If you can find it, it's just impossible to find.
I was going to say, it's not even about the price point there. It's about access.
Yeah. I have a friend who's based in Asia. He's a big wine collector, and he's always like, if you ever find it, let me know.
Give me.
Yeah. And, you know, 5 years later, I haven't found it.
Still on the hunt.
Still looking for it. Yeah. It's a rare bird, as they say. Right. So thank you very much for listening, for joining us. It was a really enjoyable pod where we got to reflect on the last few episodes. Thank you very much, Aarash, for joining and stepping in and taking over the reins. I think you did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it'd be nice to be invited next time.
Yeah, we'll see whether Jay gets his seat back now. And
I think I got a taste for it. I might not give it up anymore.
And producer Alexa.
Thank you.
Moving this side of the camera. How did you feel?
You know,
you seem quite comfortable there.
I feel great. Yeah, you know, catch me on the couch more often, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've taken to it very well. So thank you very much for.
Sorry, Jay. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me to come onto the couch.
No, it's great to have you here.
But always remember, you can catch us on your favorite streaming platform. That could be on Spotify, through Apple Podcasts. It could also be on YouTube if you want to see our faces at the same time. But whatever it is, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you give us a rating or a comment. As I said, we have just gone through, you know, we had more that we didn't get to, listeners' questions. And we love it when people engage and get in touch and leave comments, you know, whether it's on, you know, social media, LinkedIn or Instagram or one of the others, or whether it's directly, you know, where you're listening to the podcast. Any of the above is acceptable, and you can email us as well if you so wish. So love to hear from you guys. Please do get in touch, especially if there's things you'd love us to talk about or to cover. So a quick teaser of what's coming up next. We're kind of changing direction slightly for the next couple of episodes.
Tell me more.
So we've exhausted the internal Cult Wines guests 6 episodes in. So we will be bringing in some outside guests. So we've got 3 fantastic people lined up over the next few episodes. So the first one joining us will be Charlotte Christensen, who some of you who are into wine and follow people on Instagram will know as the London Wine Girl. And certainly one of the UK's most engaging voices around wine, especially for the kind of younger generation coming through. And she really makes wine feel accessible. So it'll be great to have her on the show and hear some of her thoughts. After that, we've got Victoria Dascal, who is really big in the wine education and wine writing scene. And yeah, she's going to bring a bit of sort of clarity to the sofa. She's going to very much pick up where me and Jonathan are wrong, and I'm sure we'll be getting a grade at the end of it as to how
you're going to get a taste of your own medicine.
Yeah,
in
you're
that
going to get a
episode.
taste of your own medicine. So yeah, nervously looking forward to that one now.
Guarantee.
And finally, Libby Brody, who is a wine columnist for City AM, and I think she appears in actually quite a few different publications. I'm sure you guys would have been familiar with her. Also very popular on social media. She's got a lot of followers on Instagram. She'll be joining us in the new year. So 3 sort of strong female voices from the wine world over the next 3 episodes. And certainly going to keep myself and co-host Jonathan if he comes back. But whoever's co-hosting with me, could be one of these 2, will certainly be keeping us on our toes. But yeah, we're looking forward to that. And we hope you enjoy those episodes coming up as well. So make sure, as I said, you like and you subscribe, because you'll get the notifications as soon as the latest episodes are out and you don't want to miss those. So thank you very much for listening and joining us. Take care.